Hi everyone. Today I'll be looking at completing a four-part chorale for an exam or test. Typically this type of question requires the student to add either the alto, tenor and bass parts to a given soprano or the soprano, alto and tenor parts to a given bass. Regardless whether the given part is the soprano or bass, the first thing you must do is determine the key. Occasionally the given part will give clues, such as these accidentals, which together with the key signature here suggest the key of E minor. Because this is only a sample, all phrases are in E minor. However, with your own example, you may need to modulate. Once the key is established, you should then sketch in the type of cadences you'll be using. It's important to sketch in the cadences so that you have an idea of where each phrase is heading. Bear in mind, however, that the cadences and your chord choices may be modified or changed if required. Once the cadences are sketched in, you should then sketch in a bass line, or if the given part is the bass, then the soprano part should be outlined. Both the soprano and bass parts should have a good shape and should drive towards cadences. Along with the bass notes, you should also sketch in the chords you intend using. This is not necessarily required for all exams, however, particularly if you are new to this type of harmonization, it can assist with creating functional progressions and with remembering the chords you intend using. As always, your choices may be modified or changed if required. Remember also, the notes of the given part must be included in your intended harmony and should resolve correctly if they are a tendency tone within the chord. For example, with this extract in the key of C major, this F cannot be harmonized as a G dominant 7th chord, as it would then need to resolve down by step, whereas here it leaps. Because this is for an exam or test, you want to show the examiner your knowledge and understanding of harmony and of four-part chorale textures. You should therefore endeavour to include secondary chords, suspensions and non-harmony notes. A texture solely made from a series of isolated quarter note chords is not typically endorsed, and some eighth note movement should be included. Half notes in the given part should also typically be harmonized with at least two quarter note chords and not simply left as a single chord. Other points to remember are: the given part is fixed and may not be changed or embellished. It provides the framework to which the notes of the remaining parts are attached. Each chord must contain its third. Forbidden consecutives and other rules of voice leading and part writing should be observed. Don't be afraid to keep the tenor part above the bass staff. Many people seem to think that the tenor should be predominantly kept below the A below middle C. However, keeping it above this note typically gives more scope. This is generally true of all parts, except possibly the bass. Because music tends to descend, by keeping your parts higher in their ranges, you give them room to move. You should, however, avoid writing parts which stay at the very extremes of their ranges, as this is tiring for the singers. Following on from the last point, you are writing for voices, so avoid intervals which are difficult to sing and stay within their ranges. With these points in mind, let's continue. In the first phrase, the given soprano part essentially descends from the 5th degree of E minor to the 1st at this cadence. The initial B note then should probably be harmonized with the tonic triad. The tonic triad is often the best chord to begin a harmonization, as it sets the scene tonally for the remaining bars. In the initial chord, the tenor begins on the doubled root note, while the altos have the third. As with other factors, the spacing of chords may need to be modified or changed. However, as mentioned earlier, beginning higher in a voice's range typically avoids the need to extensively alter parts. Because the following E secondary dominant 7th is a modal variant of the initial E minor chord, it contains essentially the same notes. The altos, however, now sing G sharp, the third of the secondary chord. The G sharp may also be approached by an F sharp neighbour note, creating eighth note movement between the first two chords. As here, sevenths may be sounded as a passing note after the chord to which they belong. This is a useful means of adding eighth note movement to a part. Remember, if the notes of dominant seventh chords correctly resolve, no forbidden consecutives result, a useful point to keep in mind, especially during an exam. Here, between the A subdominant and A secondary dominant seventh chord, more eighth note movement may be added. Here, the A secondary dominant's fifth is tied and resolved as a 9/8 suspension over D subtonic harmony. Remember, the resolution of a 9/8 suspension may be doubled in the bass, but with other suspension types, the resolution should not be doubled in any part. The first phrase's cadence includes a 4/3 suspension. Suspending a note of the final cadential chord is not uncommon and can create further movement, especially when, as here, the final chord lasts for a half note. The given soprano part in the second phrase contains an ascent from the fifth through the raised sixth and seventh degrees to finally cadence on the raised seventh. These repeated Bs are harmonized as a 5/1 progression, with the dominant seventh sounding as a passing note. The seventh is then prolonged and resolves as a 4/3 suspension over tonic harmony. Here, although in the original sketch a dominant seventh chord and 4/3 inversion was intended, now with the other parts filled in, a leading note diminished triad produces smoother part writing and has the same dominant function. As here, often chords with the same function may be interchanged without any change in a progression's forward drive. Here also an F sharp secondary dominant seventh chord and 4/3 inversion was intended. However, a diatonic F sharp half diminished supertonic seventh chord again produces smoother part writing. Here, leading to this example's final cadence, a partial cycle of fifths progression is used. The use of partial cycle of fifth progressions preceding cadences are a common inclusion if the notes of the given part allow it. Here, the soprano part moves through scale degrees 3, 2, and 1, with the third being harmonized as the submediant's fifth degree, and the second degree as the root note of supertonic seventh harmony, and the fifth of the dominant seventh chord. Here, the submediant includes a seventh, a not uncommon inclusion, especially during sequences or cycle of fifths progressions. Here, 4 descending eighth notes again create movement, but also imitate similar usage in bar 1. The consecutive fifths here created between the dominant seventh and the soprano's anticipation are permissible and are typically used as here at cadences. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.